Hello. Hopefully this is going. Please send a message in the YouTube chat or in Slowco if this is working so we can check to make sure the broadcast is going. But in the meantime, welcome to the Gender Diversity and Asexuality panel. We have several panelists here ready to talk to you about their experiences with the intersection of these two identities, these two different subjects. So to get started, my name is Cove. I'm the host for this panel today. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as ace flux, demi-romantic, and transgender, along with various other labels. And here with me, we'll go down the line.
I guess that's me. Hi, my name is Krista. I use she, they, but if referring to me in another way is funnier, then please do that. I identify as asexual. I'm also gray romantic and non-binary. I've been using the term androgen, so I feel like I have a lot of masculine qualities and I also have a lot of feminine qualities, and sort of trying to have that balance in my life. Yeah.
I can jump in there. Hi, my name is Marie. Pronouns are she and her. I am gender fluid. Have been on my long-term gender sort of exploration and journey. I am Arrow Ace. I think I will pass it on to Angel who's next.
Hello, I'm Angel. I identify as gender fluid and as asexual and demi-romantic. And yeah, I think that's what's relevant for this conversation, so I'll pass it on.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Marissa. As these lovely people were talking, I realized I didn't have an intro ready. I use any pronouns. I identify as panromantic, asexual. I think I am still in that kind of figuring out gender area. And I will also be on this panel as I'll be talking, but I'll also be modding, and I'm also going to be the interpreter for Cobra, our last wonderful panelist. So I want to give you a little intro to Cobra. Cobra is a neurodivergent disabled person from New South Wales. They identify as gender fluid and Arrow Ace. They helped on the Aussie Ace Week team in 2021, and they like a lot of different things, such as animals, food, and head pats. They also like learning new things and being creative. Oh, that's how you do an intro, Cobra. Oh, whoops. But yeah, so that's me and Cobra.
All right, so that's everyone we have for the panel today. I have some questions prepared ahead of time that we're going to go through. Oh, it did some fancy thing. I have some questions prepared ahead of time that we're going to go through, but while we're doing that, the moderator will also be giving some questions that you guys have. If you go to Slido, if you go to Slido, you can post your questions and we can get to them later. But to get us started off, the first question I had prepared, which is now shown on the screen, how can a gender identity interact with an ace identity, and can it affect someone's ace identity outright? So I open the floor to the panelists.
Well, I can go first, I guess, since I'm the first down the line. I think your mileage is going to vary based on person to person because everyone's identities are totally unique. The way everybody's identities intersect is totally unique. I think if we're talking in general, though, I know my gender identity is definitely interactive with my ace identity. In the sense that I didn't really question my gender until I found out I was asexual, because for me, I was raised female, and so for me, part of being female was being attracted to men. And even though I wasn't really attracted to men, I never really sat down and thought, well, I'm not really attracted to women either, because I was just ignoring it at the time. So kind of once I found out that I was asexual and that I have the same lack of attraction for all genders, lack of sexual attraction for all genders, then that sort of allowed me to turn that around and look at myself and think, okay, but then what is my gender? Do I have a gender? What does that look like? And that took a lot more like figuring things out. But it definitely, if I hadn't figured out I was asexual to begin with, I never would have questioned my gender identity, I don't think. And I'll pass it off to whoever wants to take it next.
I'll add, just because I super relate to that. I think it's one of those things, right, where it's almost like you need the vocab to get the validation. And if you don't know the vocabs out there, you don't even like start thinking about it, right? Like something maybe feels off, but you just kind of put it on the back burner or put it to the side, or you're like, everyone feels that way. And then slowly you start going, oh, wait, that was a lot of assumptions I just made. And so with me, yeah, very much found out, or not found out, but found the vocabulary and the connection with asexuality first. And as I started looking more into that and realizing, oh, it's a spectrum, and, you know, some people are ego and some people are gray, and et cetera, I started thinking, you know, some of these gender terms had never really, they never sounded right to me, right? They never felt right. And honestly, there still isn't one that totally feels right. But I just kind of like shook that off and was just like, oh, well, you know, since this doesn't feel right and this doesn't feel right, I guess I'm just, you know, what people assume I am, what, you know, people said I was when I was born, like all that stuff. And I think it's kind of interesting because it reminds me of the whole, like, you know, when someone is ace, sometimes they'll think they're, and you can be ace and bi, but sometimes someone will think they're, someone will be ace, but think they're bi because they only know that experience. So with me, it was kind of like you know, I guess I just kind of like, again, went with the default of what I knew. And as I became more open to asexuality, I became more open to these other facets of myself.
Yeah, I want to agree with what's been said before, and at least for me, like I had a very similar experience where being like ace definitely helped me like start exploring like the idea of being trans and getting away from assumptions of like cis heteropatriarchy. But I also started to like notice that I think at least recently being trans has helped me understand my aceness better, especially in terms of like I think I was very confused about like who I was attracted to and in what ways, and being able to like be more honest in my gender identity meant that I could like actually sit down and be like, oh, I feel this way and this is how I relate to other people. When I was like didn't know that I was gender fluid, it was hard for me to like understand here's how I want to relate to these people, or here's how I want to think about like the way in which I interact as different genders towards different peoples through attraction. So I think in a lot of ways it's like helped me see like, oh, here's I I think I especially agree with like the whole thing. Like I used to think I was kind of bi until I actually sat down and was like, oh, I don't really think that's quite true. So yeah, I think like anything, this kind of goes back and forth, and I found that like being ace and trans helps influence each other and helps me understand either one of them better.
All right. I think that is sufficient answer. I can add on like one more sentence. One of the things I noticed for me is that it was very cut and dry. Like I thought that you can like only be one gender or the other. Like I knew transgender existed, but I thought it was very binary transgender. And then I thought the same thing with sexuality. Like I thought like bi was the default and it has to be like one thing or the other. And so again, like everyone else that commented, navigating through ACE first helped me realize, oh, this can be a lot more dynamic with everything else. Alrighty. Going down to the next question. This is a question actually one of my friends posed, so it's a very long one, but much of the societal concept of gender revolves around heteronormative sexual dynamics. So how did the way you experience sexuality influence your ideas of gender and how you now understand your gender? It's a long one.
I mean, it's a long one, but it's a good one. And yeah, I can jump in to start this one. I think for a long time now, I've just kind of, this goes back to what I was saying about default, right? I brought up the bias thing, but with this, I kind of, for me, the default was, oh, I'm not this or this. I must just be like, a cis woman who's uncomfortable with being a woman because of the way heteronormativity, kind of just affects everything and makes itself known in, relationships, in sexual situations. So I getting some agreements, I see. I think that even to this day, I'm still very uncomfortable with that. Because, for me, I can, I see myself the way I see myself. I am who I am, but I know people still see me a certain way. I know people still have those kind of gender, sex, sexuality kind of connections. And I don't like that. I don't like that it influences, how people think of me, or maybe treat me. And it's like big things and small things, right? So something heteronormative, I don't know if this is a sexual dynamic so much as just like a relationship dynamic. Like I've had people, they'll give me like pet names like sweetheart or, stuff like that. And it's funny because it bothers me. And I think part of the reason it bothers me is because how loaded it is in assumptions and in this kind of connotation that, again, doesn't fit me in terms of how I feel or the way I want to be perceived. Oh, also, Cobra would like to add something. I think my aversion to sex influenced how I feel disconnected to heterosexuality, gender roles, and then realizing I feel gender fluid / agender.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think I really vibe with everything you said, Marissa, about not liking the assumptions that people make about you. Because, like, when you're growing up, you're a really little kid and you don't have any like romantic or sexual relationships, but you still have relatives saying, "Ooh, what a lady killer," or "Wow, she's been hanging out a lot with those guys in her class. Must be a new boyfriend," and things like that. And it sets you on this one default path and doesn't show you any other options, doesn't give you any other options. You kind of have to forge that path for yourself. And definitely, I think for me, this sexuality came first, and being able to figure out, okay, here's how I deviate from that path, and allowed me to go gender. But I think if you do it the other way, it still has the same sort of effect where you're figuring out things on your own, and then you can apply that to other aspects of your identity.
Can I jump in a little? Just a brief sort of point. I think this is agreeing a lot with what Cobra was leaning into there, is that because I knew that I sort of didn't do the attraction thing in that way from a much younger age. I knew and understood that way before I sort of really started and opened up to sort of the gender journey. But recognizing I was different in that way, just sort of like as I was growing, it's like, well, what are all these rules people are saying? They don't really make sense to me. So I think it sort of set me up as I developed and grew to question and sort of build out paths that made more sense to me than what I was told.
We should have like a jazz hands every time we like something somebody says.
Hands up the entire panel.
Yeah, right? Like just the whole time. So much of that was relatable. Okay. So are we good to move on? All right. So taking that one down. The next question, this one kind of relates to the reason why this is its own topic, or one of the many reasons why this is its own topic, is giving this part of the community a voice. So we can talk about like how does having a voice, like the gender diverse, let me start over. How does being gender diverse affect your interaction with the larger ACE community?
All right, guess I'll start again. So I think all your different identities, they all intersect in different ways. So yes, of course it impacts interactions with the larger ACE community. But also I feel like whenever you try to talk about gender, cis people don't get it. And talking about gender with other trans people feels so much more affirming because these are things that we think about a lot more in a similar way where talking about attraction with other ace people can feel really affirming. So whenever I'm trying to talk about gender with people, I treat it completely differently depending on whether I'm in a trans space or if I'm not in a trans space. And I'll also say as a disclaimer, I think there's also a lot of ways trans people talk about gender that I don't fully agree with because it's so personal, not just how you see gender, but what is gendered to you and how much does gender play a role in your life. And that's all very individual. So that can totally depend who you're talking to, what that sort of conversation is like. And I think no matter what community you're in, we sort of always implicitly categorize people by gender. And a lot of times, if you're not in a trans space, that is either I'm going to put you in the male category or I'm going to put you in the female category. And even if it's not something that's spoken out loud, you could still tell. So if you're like me and you don't feel like you fit firmly into either of those categories, you're very aware that people are assuming, like people look at me and they assume that I'm female and they're putting me in this little box that I don't really want to be in. So it impacts my relationships with everyone. Like none of that stuff was really ace specific, but especially when you're talking about things like sexuality, they're so tied up in gender. It comes up a lot and has a pretty big impact. I'll stop talking there.
Cobra wanted to add that they get the you can't or don't like the you can't be trans and ace comments or ace and in a relationship, etc., especially if you're arrow.
I think for me, probably the biggest interaction is the awareness that the ace community is way more receptive to not cis identities and supportive than I think anywhere else. I suppose this is because we're 40% not cis people in the ace community, but still. And I think it's a huge factor, and I think it makes the ace community so much more welcoming and wonderful.
Yeah, I just want to agree with all that, though. One thing I can say as an AMAB person that very much annoys me is I don't get to be your token ace dude. Like, I feel like I get that treatment a lot, and it's very annoying because, like, I get that like men are often not ace, and that's like a problem, and it's a perspective that's often missed in ace communities. But I just am sick of like if I find an actual man to fulfill that role for your community. That's just something like as much as I agree that generally I found them very accepting, that's one thing that's always very much annoyed me.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed it at like very weird times where it'll be like a very inclusive, nice space, but then there'll be like one comment sometimes where it throws you off. I guess that's true with a lot of places, but like regarding gender, sometimes not everyone is caught up on like the gender vocabulary, if that makes sense. And I'll notice that occasionally.
Well, I'd love to add to that because I feel like this is like one of the few settings where I feel like I can say these things and not be judged for them. I don't always feel like I'm up to date because I feel like this goes back to what I was saying. Even first, there's a lot of words, but also just the fact that when I say man and woman, when I say I was saying like coy gender before, and I'm like I don't know if people actually say that, but there's coy romantic, so maybe. And so like. And agender versus non-binary, but the overlap. Like I feel like there are these words that we all kind of sometimes do think we're having the same conversation, but then we realize actually someone had this slightly different connotation of what it means. And it's frustrating, and I sometimes become, oh, good idea, Krista. Quite romantic, also known as WTF romantic, is kind of like, what is romance? Like, I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. And when it comes to gender, I'm like, thank you. So that's why I was like saying coy gender. But it gets very frustrating for me because sometimes I feel like there's this conversation going on that everyone understands. Like, you know, everyone feels very comfortable being this identity, be it cis or otherwise, but like they found their label, they found what makes sense to them and makes them feel that kind of gender affirmation. And, you know, I haven't found that yet. And I also then get frustrated at myself because it's kind of like, well, I don't need to be using the exact vocabulary if this is what makes sense to that person, if this is like right for them. So it goes back and forth, right? Because sometimes I get frustrated because I think the lack of that cohesive vocabulary does make it harder for me personally, but it makes it so much easier for others. So it's like, you don't want to get in the way of that, but you do want to find what makes sense for you and is true for you. So it can be hard sometimes. And sometimes when you express that feeling, I feel like people don't respond well because I think that can come from a very bad faith perspective, honestly. But I feel like in the ace community, it's been very, people have been very understanding of that confusion. And I hope it's because it's, you know, trying to come from a good place with it. I hope that made sense.
I think so.
Can I just want to respond to that real quick, because I think also a lot of it is because when you're in the ace community, you're thinking a lot more about like labels and terms and what they mean and things like that. So you already have that base of knowledge, and you can then apply it to gender as well. Might be impacting that in a sense.
I think we're good. I think everyone commented, so. All right. We have a few more questions I prepared, and then hopefully we can hop into some questions that you guys, the audience, have. So next up, a lot of people wanted me to ask this one, and I tried very hard to find a good way to word it. So feel free to rephrase this question as you need to answer it. And if you haven't had this experience, then feel free to reframe it however you think is helpful to the audience. But many aspec and or gender diverse people have experienced some confusion regarding the interaction between dysphoria and sex repulsion, and wondering, like, struggling to find the like barriers of their ace identity within that. So what do you think about this relationship, and do you have any advice for people who are going through this? And I can start as well, because this is something I can't comment on for sure. Dysphoria. So there were two big things that really confused me with gender. The first one was the thing Marissa mentioned earlier, where a lot of the norms for being a woman were very much like not for me, but I couldn't recognize that. And so that kind of got me into feeling discomforted about myself, and then that got me to feeling discomforted at the idea of being with someone else, and that's kind of what led me to explore my ace identity. So in a way, that's because of gender, but on another level, dysphoria, I always would, when I was considering my sexuality or like attraction in general, I would always see myself in the female role, and I would always not like that role. And so dysphoria really did like confuse me a lot with my sexuality, and it actually pushed me to identify as ace, so in a way it helped. But then later on, when I was trying to define it, because I'm ace flux and everything's changing and dysphoria changes too, it was really hard to get all the pieces lined up so I can balance them all out. It's not something I necessarily needed to do. I generally knew I was on the ace spec and moving, but with finding out my gender and having to like go through all the mental work that comes with doing that, I just decided that I was going to organize and lay out my identity with my sexuality as well, so that I can have a understanding of who I am. was a lot of words. I hope that made sense.
I think I'll jump in for this one from the perspective of advice. I think and y'all are going to hear this throughout several of these panels, you know, the label is supposed to help you. It is not supposed to, define you. You don't need to like fit it 100%. You're allowed to change. Or figure things out, et cetera, et cetera. So like, maybe you are confused. And like, I feel like that's like taboo, like, no one's confused. We all get it. No, like what, who has aced life like that? Aced life. Oh, didn't even mean to do that one. But really, who has, right? No one's got it figured out like that. So it's totally okay if you're still figuring that out. And if you are at this kind of crossroads of, which one is it, especially if the end result is kind of the same for you, then, if you end up just changing the word in the somewhere down the line, that's okay. At the same time, though, yeah, feel free to sit with that and try and explore it and figure it out. I say that as someone who is dysphoric and sex repulsed and ace, because I've never personally felt like those were competing for me personally. And I think that was just luck, to be totally honest. I think it makes a lot more sense for it to be confusing because it's like, well, which one is like the primary, how are they interacting, etc. And at the end of the day, like I said, if that's stressing you out, if that's just making it harder for you to, be true to yourself and, take your next steps to figure yourself out and feel comfortable in yourself, like, then why? And if one day you do want to go back and figure it out more, that's also okay. So just don't feel pressured. And just know at the same time, you can do it if you want to figure it out.
Yeah. Jazz hands all that. And I just also want to clarify for me, when I say that I went through and I figured it out, that was like a year. My method wasn't trying to force the issue. My method was to analyze it as it came by and just take notes as it happened until I felt I had enough information to actually say, oh, I think I get this now. So that especially worked for me, is just letting it play out as it goes.
Oh, and Cobra actually has one too. Sorry to cut you off. Cobra said, it's so confusing to me right now, but I'd experiment with labels, clothes, etc. to see what you feel comfortable with.
All right. We good? All right. All right. Just a few more. So, okay. How can one's gender identity affect how someone perceives attraction? One of the things that I hear a lot is like I want to look like this person, or do I want to be with this person, and having that confusion. I definitely felt that at first until I, again, figured it out with time. But do you have any comments or experiences you would like to share regarding this?
I'd be happy to jump in. Yeah, that totally happened to me. Definitely as I was growing up and doing the thing, I didn't get it. I wanted to look at people, in my case, and what I'm hearing from everyone else, I just assumed that was this attraction that everyone's doing. But it took me a while to figure out that no, it was really just that I wanted those traits myself. And I was trying to understand them.
I guess I can try to speak about. It's hard for me because I feel like I still struggle with this, so it's not like I really have advice for parsing this out. But I know Like I have a lot of gender tied up in my hair and whatever it is that's going on up here. Right now I'm in a short hair phase. Probably in a year or so I'm gonna get bored and then try and grow it out and then like cut it all off again. I do a lot of weird things to my hair. But I definitely like there'll be people or actors or fictional characters where I just really like their hair and I look at it and I go, "Oh my god, that is so gender right there." Like I want that. And also cat, yeah. And it's hard because a lot of those people are more masculine and not I don't know. I get attraction to like both men and women, and it's a lot rarer with men. So usually, whenever that happens, I have to sort of sit down and try to figure out, all right, do I actually have any romantic attraction, or do I just want this person's hair? It's hard.
That is very true. Gender is stored in the hair. I have way too many like 1 a.m. shaving decisions because if the hair dysphoria comes around, I'll just do it. I don't. It's not great, but it still happens. No, I definitely get this a lot when it comes to like characters and stuff like that. And sometimes I just save a photo and then I'll return to it later and reflect on it. But I don't have this figured out either. It's ongoing, especially as my attraction changes too. It's complicated. The hair is a vibe. Would anyone else like to comment on gender identity possibly affecting how you perceive attraction? Five, four, three, two, one. Alrighty. And then the last one I prepared. How does being gender diverse affect looking for partners, romantic, platonic, like any kind of partner you are looking for, or if you have anything to comment on this. And if you don't have anything to comment on regarding that, also friends. Like, do you feel like you have to come out to your friends for these identities? No. Is that a no?
No, that's an I have feelings. First off, thanks everyone for saying nice things about my cat. She appreciates it. But second of all, oh my goodness, this is so going to, I guess in order, the romantic one, already so hard to tell a potential partner, your ace, right? Explain what that means, explain how you're not necessarily exactly what that's going to look like within the confines of the relationship. So already that, right? And then to like bring up, also, in my case, not having the exact word too. So it's like not even like, oh, here's this thing you didn't know about me or this thing I want you to know about me. It's, hey, here's this thing that I don't know about me. Hope you're okay with that. Going off of the friends part, that is so hard because I love my friends. They're wonderful. But multiple times I have brought up that, I've had this kind of gender, let's go back to confusion, right? Gender confusion used in this sense, gender discomfort, gender, like all these things. And I've got like on here, it says any pronouns. I've published things where it's like any pronouns, and it's hard because my friends still all call me she and her. Do I still go with that for the most part? Yes. So like, I'm not making their lives easy. I'm not making this any less complicated, but it's hard because it feels kind of like, it feels kind of like you want to share these things, but it goes back to the whole, you don't want to be wrong and then have to, wrong and then have to like change it on them because it's going to get more complicated. And also sometimes it's hard when it's like, you need something, but you don't know what it is exactly in terms of validation from them and support. And like, it's hard because I've had like family members. I had a niece recently, and my sister had asked me like, oh, are you okay with her calling you aunt, or do you want something else? And I was like, That's so sweet. I think that's the first time anyone has ever asked me something like that. Defaulted to aunt because honestly, I don't know any other term. And also because it didn't really bother me because I couldn't even tell you why. Honestly, if she said uncle, that also wouldn't have bothered me. Neither would have felt right, but wouldn't have bothered me. So I feel like this is so hard because yes, I feel like it's something that you want to tell your friends. You want them to see you in that light. But you also don't want to mess it up. And you also want to kind of, this is so unfair, right? You want them to almost figure it out a little, right? Like you don't want to have to come to them and like have this whole, this is me. It's like, I think it's like we all have that secret. Why can't you just know and read my brain already? Aren't we close enough? So yeah, I just have a lot of feelings about that. And hopefully someone can help me figure what to do with them.
I wish we could just give you an answer, Marissa. It would be so helpful.
What did I come to this panel for, y'all? Come on.
One little story I thought I'd share is from earlier on. It was much earlier when I was still early on in my journey, my gender journey anyway. I was also early on in dating because I wasn't necessarily interested in that, funny thing that with being aroace. And I was starting a relationship with somebody and, come to the conclusion that, okay, this was at the point where I have to talk to her about these identities. And I was fully expecting the gender to be the problem, and it wasn't. And I kind of suspect that's probably a common situation, that she had a harder time dealing with the fact that I was ace than the fact that I was not cis.
I think Cobra wants to add to this, kind of in similar veins. They said it can be harder to look for partners, especially there might be a majority of gay men, but not as many people who are okay with platonic and or non-sexual relationships. But the relationships I do make are more emotionally close, and there have been times where gender confusion means my friends are still exploring how they identify. Also, a need for gender-neutral terms for relationships, friend or otherwise, etc.
We do need that.
Yeah, I could hop in here as well. So when I spent a very brief period of my time on a dating app, I felt very confident putting up on there and like first thing you see when you come to my profile, hey, I'm asexual. You got to be okay with this, because I feel so secure in that identity, and I feel okay putting it out there. And like I had one guy I think who messaged me being like, yo, what happened to you? I went through a phase when I was gay, but I never did this. And I was just like, all right, that's weird. Block. Thank you. But I felt less comfortable putting the gender stuff on there. And I think for a lot of similar reasons to Marissa, because I don't look trans, I haven't transitioned or anything. I look like a cis woman, but my hair is short, so I'm also like an angry cis woman. So that's what people tend to think of me as. And I think I've also come away since then where I would want any romantic, platonic, or otherwise partners to also know about gender identity. And I think I would have more confidence with that now. But it's also like it is hard because whenever I say, oh, I use she or they pronouns, again, most people just use she. But I've also found that a lot of people who are down with trans, more or less, they will sometimes use they. So I can use it sort of as a marker for like, hey, is this person cool with trans people? And I like that a lot because it's sort of very low bar. I don't have to like risk a ton with that. But then I also get people who see my she, they pronoun pin button and immediately apologize because they're like, oh, they, them pronouns are really hard for me, as if my gender's an inconvenience to them or something. So yeah, I am currently in a relationship with a trans guy. It's Ziggy in the chat, who's been posting things. So hey, babe. And that's been really great, being able to date someone who is also a little gender spicy, because we can talk about it a lot. And I definitely recommend, if you're questioning, surround yourself with other trans people, because it makes the conversations a lot easier.
So true. Gather your support group or family, however you define it.
That is my emotional support, trans people.
Yes. I can't comment much on the partner thing. I'm just too terrified to even think about it most of the time. It just sounds stressful. And I guess this also relates to friends. So what I'm going to say does apply to it. I just can't specifically comment on it. I think one of the scary things for me is I'm still in college. I'm surrounded by all these people just on the basis of I have classes with them. I live in an apartment. There's other people in my apartment. But I mean, very soon, in 3 years, after I get my master's, I'll be in the open world. And I think that's even scarier. It's because people don't already have their like pronoun pins on their bags, probably at work and stuff like that, or however you meet people when you're not at a school. And so this isn't more advice. It's more I'm getting more concerned about this when you don't already have these clubs made for your identity groups. I guess there are like meetups and stuff like that that people host in their communities, but it's more, you have to hunt for it more than at a university. Does that make sense? So, and then a comment about friends is, I think one of the more annoying things about how having these identities affects how I interact with friends is what I share. I'll share different amounts of things with different friends, and it's hard to juggle. And it's also annoying when a friend gets jealous of other friends. And I feel like it's not something worth getting jealous for knowing more about me. But that's my perception from the outside. So, yep. Also, yes, I added a question that one of the people put in on Slido, the top question right now. Do you feel that your asexuality helped you feel more comfortable with experimenting with your gender expression? Yeah. Thumbs up. I think at first it gave a little bit more freedom because then I cared a little bit less about fitting expectations. I decided, oh, I can just look how I want to look now.
I mean, for me, no. I dress like a slob now, and I dressed like a slob before, because I have never been dressing for attraction reasons. Like, even when I thought I was a straight woman, I never was dressing for, like, men. You all could get that somewhere else.
Oh, are you talking? Yeah. Oh, I thought I saw your mouth moving. Sorry. I was like, oh no.
I'm reading the Slido questions and seeing if there's...
Oh, gotcha. I'll add to this one while you're looking, just because I was the one who thumbs up. Yeah, I think it's interesting because it first made me go like, goodbye dresses. And then like shortly after that, I was like, well, actually now I kind of want dresses for like certain situations. And I know that's like oversimplifying, obviously. But I think I was able to break a little bit from, again, the connotation, at least in my mind, of what that would mean. So it made it easier to be like, you know, I want to wear pants to your wedding, and I want to wear a dress around the house because it is more comfortable. So stuff like that.
I see Cobra also as a comment, I think.
Cobra, I'm the worst. Yes, they said, yes, I feel like disconnected. I feel like I disconnected objectifying my body to what I'm comfortable wearing / how I look. Yes, that was said perfectly. I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at too. So thank you.
Okay, this is actually, again, another very niche experience, but because I was sex repulsed and I'm a very challenge my fears head on person, I was like, hey, I'm going to, first of all, challenge this notion. So I started like working on it. And one of the things I did after I was comfortable with my gender enough to do it, and after I was like trying to cement in my brain, like I can separate like sex with some of the things that our society couples with it, in particular burlesque. So I joined a like burlesque dance event thing just to prove to myself I could. And I think that's one of those examples where like I was freaking out beforehand because I was like, I'm ace, I don't belong here, even though that wasn't true. And I get there and like half the people had ace flags on their like little water bottles and everything. So that was a shocker. And then everyone was very supportive, and that was one of the like big eye-opening things, was seeing all of them be comfortable with however they dressed. People came in like all kinds of dress to that event, and I don't know, that was eye-opening in its way, was seeing, oh look, I'm not the only one here, and also seeing these people be comfortable helps me feel comfortable with myself. So yeah. All right. I did snatch one more question. We kind of started to answer it earlier, but we didn't really dive that much into it. So, bonk. Is it on the screen? I don't think so. Someone asked, do you have any theories on why there's such a significant overlap between aspex folks and trans / non-binary or agender, we'll just say gender diverse folks?
I got theories. So, yeah, I mean, what this question is referring to is that if you look at statistics surrounding the ACE community, so the ACE community census, the Trevor Project had a study on, I think it was specifically ACE teens a while ago. A much larger proportion of the ACE community is trans, non-binary, gender diverse than if you look at like the queer community in general and things like that, which is really fascinating. I think it's a really cool part of the community. And yeah, I don't think like there's a definitive reason we could point to, but my theory is that because asexuality is it's lack of attraction regardless of gender, I think that allows people to sort of get away from those notions of gender a little bit more, and things like that, and just sort of be able to question their gender as well as their attraction to other genders.
Yeah, my only thoughts on this are kind of in line with that. It's once people start questioning some things, once you start breaking down the amount-normativity and the societal expectations, like people can see these other options and they can explore them. And I don't know. I think this is a huge benefit, to having the identities in this community.
Yeah, I think once we start breaking down, this is how things have to be, it opens opportunities to all these other ways things can be and are. And I mean, everything is a construct, right? So like at the end of the day, once you realize like one construct is like is not the full story, you begin to try and figure out the rest of the story for these other constructs. So I think that it's just kind of a more freeing situation, I guess. So you're able to kind of just look into these things in a way you wouldn't otherwise, again, because you wouldn't have the vocab, you wouldn't realize that they're there, you wouldn't realize you're allowed to think this way or be this way. So yeah, I think as more and more people become like, even if someone like learns of asexuality and doesn't necessarily feel like it fits them, I still feel like that could open them up to another understanding or a deeper understanding of their gender identity. Because as you learn that one thing has more parts, more routes, more depth, you kind of start realizing everything does, or at least can.
Yeah. We are at 6:40. I believe that is the time that this panel ends. So do we have last goodbyes? Any last comments? A cat?
Yeah, I mean, if I could give a plug for whatever is happening after this. After this, there's going to be a Welcome to Sydney live stream event and I think a presentation from AACAU, which stands for something that escapes me right now, but it's the group in Australia that's been coordinating the International Asexuality Conference this year. So that is what's happening next. So you should hop over to those YouTube links afterwards.
I'm waiting for something to come through from the chat. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We didn't get an answer from Cobra, but generally, we loved being part of this panel. Thank you for coming. And
Oh, wait, we did get an answer.
We did get an answer?
Yes, that Cobra said that this panel helped them feel validated, and hopefully everybody else, because I agree.
I agree. 100%.
Thank you, Co, for hosting, and thanks, Marissa, for modding.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for being part of it. Sunny also appreciated that.
Bye. Enjoy the convention.